3 minutes after 10 is the time, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Well done. Well, that's a great choice. What a great start to the week that is. What a wonderful decision. Let's hope that proves to be. I try and introduce a little bit of levity at the top of the show, because even though we approach an event that I think was very special and rather beautiful, I do so with the sense of walking on eggshells once again whenever we turn our attention to the unfolding tragedies in the Middle East, and indeed the reflections of those tragedies back in the United Kingdom. It is almost impossible to say anything of meaning without upsetting someone. And as you get older in life, I think you begin to recognise, especially if you do what I do for a living, that upsetting people is not actually a very nice thing to do. Sometimes you have to do it, to stay with the egg-based analogies. You can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. But to carelessly upset people, or worse still, to deliberately upset people, it should prey a little bit more on the collective consciousnesses, I think, of professional commentators than it seems to. Some people, of course, seem to revel in the performative or the deliberate provocation of upset and insult. The Daily Mail, for example, can't help itself today. Rather than just simply talking about how special the march yesterday was, instead they have to draw comparisons with marches in solidarity with Palestinian people. I don't know what would be the equivalent of that if you were taking a Daily Mail approach to the anti-Semitism march yesterday. I suppose you'd start asking, where were all the banners calling for a ceasefire or for the cessation of the killing of Palestinian children? But do you see what I mean? You just because the other people behave abominably doesn't mean that you should give in to the temptation to behave similarly abominably yourself. So I want to talk about yesterday's march from a perspective of beauty, actually, if that's all right with you. I want to talk about it from a perspective of importance to the Jewish experience. I don't want to indulge in any whataboutery. I don't want you to complain about people who were there not having been at other things, or people who weren't there having been at other things. I want you to reflect for a moment, and I'm sorry that I sound a bit paternalistic this morning or a bit preachy, but I want you to reflect upon the meaning of the word solidarity. That's all. And why, for non-Jews, the full impact of these scenes, whether you were there or not, is so extraordinary. I have an inkling that it is. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn by using the word extraordinary. I live with this this incredible dissonance at the moment, as I'm sure you probably do as well. For those of us blessed, if that's the right word, not to have personal investment in these unfolding tragedies, not to have family in the Gaza Strip or Israel or the West Bank or friends or close friends, it's so hard to hold a steady course. It's so hard to feel comparable levels of horror at the death of two children from two completely opposing camps, or two adults, two non-combatants from two completely opposing camps, and it doesn't make sense, does it? It's not a position of logic to be sort of equally heartbroken by deaths on all sides, not even on both sides. It doesn't sustain, because you have to have some inkling of precedence. You have to believe in a cause, for example, and I don't believe in Hamas's cause. I do believe in Israel's right to defend itself, but I don't believe in the carnage. I don't support the carnage that is continuing. I welcome the ceasefire. I hope it continues, and yet at the same time I understand the dedication to the notion of eradicating Hamas, but not to the point that it involves razing the entire Gaza Strip, where I think more people have already been killed, give or take, than in the first year of America's invasion of Iraq, I think I read this morning. So I mean, that's one of the reasons we haven't talked about it as much, perhaps, as we might have done, because I don't have what could be described as a strong and simple position. A strong and simple position. 8 minutes after 10. But I do on this march, which is why it's almost refreshing, as a, quotes, professional commentator, end quotes, to simply be able to say, God, that was nice. God, that was lovely. I wasn't there. I was in Hay-on-Wye, actually, at a book festival, but I followed the unfolding of it with an early trepidation that it might, previous marches by people demonstrating solidarity with the Palestinian cause that might get polluted by far-right agitators. And, the reason why it would have been polluted by far-right agitators is because support for Jews or opposition to anti-Semitism does not and must not be conflated with support for the continuing annihilation of people in the Gaza Strip, the continuing bombardment of Muslims, which is what far-right agitators would feel rather warm towards. And yet the some of the scenes of the pro-Palestinian marches have been deeply, deeply moving as well. But the Jewish experience in this country is one of trepidation. It took me a very long time to understand this, and I didn't understand it until I started doing this job. And in fact, if I didn't do this job, I'm not sure I ever would have understood it. But perhaps one of the simplest ways into it is this. When you're conflating Israel with anti-Semitism, or you're conflating opposition to Israel with anti-Semitism, you are denying anti-Semitism, because at its very, very simplest, you're forgetting what happened before the modern state of Israel existed. So the idea that Jewish people should be constantly conscious of the difference between criticising Israel and anti-Semitism is fanciful because of what happened before the modern state of Israel existed. The knowledge, not just of the Holocaust, but of pogroms, of centuries of persecution, the absence of a home, a safe and permanent home, the relationship between the Jewish identity for most Jews and the modern state of Israel is almost impossible for an outsider to comprehend. And the reason why that relationship is so acute is because of the packed bag syndrome, as it were. The knowledge, not the fear, but the knowledge that you might have to leave the place you've called home for 1, 2, 3, 30 generations. You might have to leave it again. The familial story, the people's story is one of persecution, pogrom, and exodus. We might have to leave. So what I found so moving and profoundly emotional about yesterday's march was the message being sent to Jews in Britain, to British Jews, that you are at home now. You are at home here. But that's only what I saw. It can't be what I felt because I'm not Jewish. Because I'm not Jewish. So I want you to tell me what it means to you. 03456060973. Explain to somebody why this was so important, why this is more than, why this is much more and not the same as expressing solidarity with the current military policies of Benjamin Netanyahu, but a march united against anti-Semitism on the streets of London on a scale not seen since the residents and defenders of Cable Street repelled and refused to let pass the brown-shirted fascists of Oswald Mosley. The number you need is 03456060973. I just want to get into it. I want to get into the power and importance of what you saw or what you were part of yesterday. And I want you to, again, I stress, I want you to try to help me, to help other people listening, to understand why this is such a remarkable moment, why this was such a special event. In fact, such a special event that I'm going to suspend Idiot's Corner today, at least for the first hour of the programme. People are already applying to join it with the whataboutery and the references to the IDF and various other. This is not what yesterday was about. And I think that the organisers or everybody present did a really brilliant job of making the purpose clear. I think some people who turned up did so opportunistically. I don't know if it's a bit ambitious to suggest that if you are a vaguely public figure and you go on something like this, the last thing you should do is post a selfie. But on the other hand, you are showing your solidarity. So why should you not publicise the demonstration of solidarity? But there was some opportunism on the ground. You can't help that. You can, however, acknowledge that shoulder to shoulder with British Jews is a statement of, I think, on this scale, of unprecedented importance. And I just need a little bit of help this morning communicating that to people who perhaps don't see it or understand it. And I want you to tell me why. Why was this march so important to you? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973. Leslie puts it well. She says, I'm in touch with people in Israel. I can tell you this march of solidarity with the Jewish people meant the world to them. It was especially beautiful because it wasn't against anyone or anything. It wasn't even pro-Israel. It was simply a show of support and understanding. One of the hardest things I can imagine about being Jewish at the moment would be the presumption by people who know you well and who you thought you knew well, that you must somehow be in complete agreement with absolutely everything that is done by the Israeli state. And that's why Leslie's point is so pertinent, isn't it? Because you just don't go there on a day like yesterday. This is a march in opposition to anti-Semitism, but essentially it's a march of solidarity and support. That phrase, shoulder to shoulder, is so powerful. I mean, if it's against anything, it's against hatred and bigotry. And that's why I think it resonated with me in a way that I wouldn't say I wasn't expecting, but I certainly wasn't. I mean, the numbers were part of it, the faces, the signs, the placards. I think it reached parts of me that I didn't know would be reached, or possibly that I didn't even know existed. It's a long time since I felt very proud to be British. But I did yesterday, watching these scenes. Not least because there was a mate of mine in the very front row of it all, Eddie Marson there at the front page of the Times this morning, and Rob Rinder, who's been a wonderful guest on Full Disclosure as well, and Rachel Riley, who I've had the pleasure of meeting on several occasions, and Vanessa Feltz, ditto, who I'm a big fan of. Just lovely to see this sort of linking of arms, both actual, both physical and metaphorical. But I am merely an outsider. And today I want to know the inside view on what this meant. And look back over family stories, look back over history, look back over that narrative of the permanently packed bags, whether metaphorical or actual, and whether or not... would you allow me to ask it slightly? I just ask, has it changed the way you feel about being British? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And if you hit the numbers now, you will get through. 19 minutes after 10 is the time. And we spend a lot of time attacking newspapers. So today we'll give some credit to the Times. They got their front page absolutely spot on today. Doesn't even have a big headline. It certainly doesn't do what the Daily Mail does and use the opportunity of a very special moment to take swings at people that they don't like, and it certainly doesn't do what the Daily Telegraph does, which is to mark the March Against Anti-Semitism with a big picture of Boris Johnson and his wife, who, to their credit, attended. But the idea that would be the most important element to take away is something you would have to take up with the editor of the Daily Telegraph. I'm taking it up with you, and I want to know why. Actually, can I change my question slightly? I want to know why you, in the beginning as a British Jew, but we'll move away from that qualification shortly as well, were you surprised by the profundity of what you felt yesterday, whether you were there or not? Did it take you by surprise? And if so, why? Abigail is in Norfolk, which is quite vague. Abigail, what would you like to say?
Hi, I'd just like to say that I'm a British Jew. What was really important to me about the march yesterday was, although I wasn't there, my husband went and my daughter went and my son's in London and they all met up together.
Oh, that's nice.
It was, yeah, and I'm just relieved that it went so well. I'm glad that it was Jews and non-Jews alike showed the best of themselves. And I'd also like to say that when you have children who are generally the only Jewish children in a school, and it can be so isolating, that they could actually be with other Jews and non-Jews and feel that they weren't under threat, because it's very much like that in some schools. And
in your children's school?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Really?
Not in her current school. No, my son has left school now, but it was every day.
Okay.
It was every day. And horrific, actually, really disturbing. But
so it counters that a bit, because it won't remove that, will it? But
No.
What does it do? What's the right word to use then? It reminds you that that's not The
That's
only
not,
outlook.
exactly. And it was, yes, of course, there were, being amongst fellow Jews, but the fact that non-Jewish people were there, and that there was this wonderful kind of moment, and my husband was sending me photographs and things like that. And just to feel part of a bigger and better moment.
You hope it's there, but you can't be sure. And then on days like yesterday, you can. Yeah,
well, to be quite honest, it's been really hot. We've had not a very pleasant experience throughout our time.
Gosh, I'm very sorry to hear that.
Well, it's, you can say, I'm not okay about it, but we survive it.
Yes, of course. I understand exactly what you're saying. The acknowledgement of it, but the need to get through it can sometimes sound as if you're sort of saying, oh, it's fine, it doesn't bother, but it does hurt and it does bother you, but you have no choice but to wade on. Thank you, Abigail. Amanda is in Finchley, 2 A's. There you go. Amanda, what would you like to say?
Hi there. I felt that it was extremely important to show up, to show our faces, to not be afraid. I mean, we've had such a difficult, 50 or so days with genuine fear from my children and genuine anxiety amongst my friends and my family about what we do, where we go, whether we can go out on a certain day, what we should do. And this felt like our day. We're proud. Nobody covered their faces. There was nothing that was vaguely scary or antagonistic about it. It was wonderful. My children, who are 16 and 14, said before we went, should we be afraid? And do you think anyone will try and hurt us? And I said, no, don't be silly. Don't need to be afraid. And they said, well, what's the worst that can happen? And we went into the very worst that might happen is that somebody might shout things at us. And
they'd have to be unhinged, I think, to do so in those sort of contexts. And I understand the point you make about covered faces, but I suppose people who were marching the previous day or previous weeks in solidarity with Palestinians had to deal with the British Home Secretary calling them hate marchers, even if they were pushing their pushchairs along with their children in. So is it progress, do you think, to know that the far right were not planning to mobilise, were not threatening to turn up in mob-handed to abuse you and attack you? I think it's progress, isn't it?
I think that's progress, but I think for the most part it was just about being present, being there. And I said to the children, we felt it was momentous. We felt like in however many years' time there might be even just a small footnote in a book, in a historical tome.
It's astonishing numbers when you think about the total Jewish population in this country, and then well over 500,000 people. There's always a bit of debate about the final numbers, but I've read 630,000 in enough places to give it some credence. It is astonishing. You use that word momentous. So something shifts inside you, does it? It's as if a hope. What is a hope? Crystallizes. It becomes firmer.
Yeah, it became reality. It was something concrete, and it felt like it was a mass gathering of people who, as the text that you said, we weren't against anything. We were just for a tolerant society where we can live and contribute and continue our lives as we always have done. And I think the scariest thing about what has happened in the last few weeks for me and my family and our friends is that perhaps we felt that we were very much a part of British society and all the things that we do and the way we contribute and the way we live. But actually it felt like something had changed and something had been lifted off, and that perhaps we weren't as much of as British as we thought we were. It was like a veil had lifted off, and that is really frightening. And to feel like others, which I don't think I'd ever felt. Born in Manchester, live in London, do my stuff, do my thing, do what everybody else does. But I've never felt much of another. I've been very proud Jew all my life. Attend synagogue and all of that. Yes. But I hadn't felt like another person. I'd felt like everybody else. And I think this last few months has made me feel and made my community feel. That's been
underestimated, hasn't it? In fact, I've probably got that a little bit wrong by talking about the packed bags and the sense of permanent threat. In fact, the generation after generation, presumably that diminishes in places of peacefulness. So you do actually, as you say, not feel it as anywhere near as keenly as, for example, your grandparents would have done, or even perhaps your parents. And then just seeing what seemed to be a dreadful conflation from some quarters. Can I ask you something from a personal perspective? Is when I say to you that I want everyone marching in solidarity with Palestinian people to feel as British and as at home as I do and as you did yesterday.
Yeah.
Is that feasible to you? Is that plausible? Are you comfortable with that?
I think it is. And when I watched the videos of those marches, I also, a lot of what we experienced yesterday, I can see mirrored. But what I didn't see yesterday was any element of something that felt more extreme and a bit darker and felt threatening. And that is, I think, as a Jewish person, when you do see from the river to the sea, it does have a meaning. And I don't think anyone can tell us it doesn't, it shouldn't, because it does. So it didn't spill over.
It's been explained enough now to
Yes. And if those things continue to happen in that tiny element of those peaceful protests,
it continues to pollute the whole thing in a way. Is it pertinent that the other marches are taking place in the context of continued and continuing carnage? So I mean, some of it obviously permanently inexcusable, but there would be a different emotional feel to a march in the context of continuing bombardment, showing solidarity with people who are actually being killed every day, as opposed to showing solidarity with people who face barrages of abuse and persecution. There is a difference there, isn't there, of some sort?
Between the two marches?
Well, no, between the two causes. There's something more. I don't know. For an outsider, anti-Semitism is a disgusting cancer that has polluted humanity for centuries, and yet the Palestinian marches are in large part dedicated to trying to stop killing that's happening right now.
Yes, I appreciate that and understand that. And there's an urgency to that.
That's
and
the word. Yes.
There's a passion, and it provokes extreme reactions and extreme sadness and fear. But on the other hand, for what we've experienced as well, as British citizens living in a country where we've many of us now have experienced a level of otherness and hatred and suspicion that we've never felt before. This is also a time of crisis, and that's how it felt. And yes, it was a culmination.
That's brilliantly put. Thank you. That's incredibly well. It's much better. Thank you for that. I found that really, really helpful. I got a sort of sense of a pendulum being pushed back, a pendulum that you weren't expecting to swing, or you didn't know would swing in the direction that it feels like it has done in the last few weeks, and it got pushed back quite profoundly yesterday.
Yes, it did.
Thank you.
It was very special. Thank you, James.
No, thank you. It is coming up to 10:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I've said I've suspended Idiot's Corner, perhaps because I forget people tune in halfway through. Amanda's proved perfectly why. I'm not interested in who wasn't there. I'm sorry. I know that we're such a boiled population at the moment that you look at something like that and the first thing you think of is, who can I get cross with for not being there, rather than, I think I might just allow myself a moment of empathy with the people who were. Why wasn't so-and-so there? Why hasn't this done that or the other? It's just silly. Come on. How bent have your priorities become that you see a wonderful show of solidarity and the first thing you think of are the people who aren't there? It's just not normal behaviour, that. You can do better. In fact, it's almost an insult to the thinking and the feeling behind the whole march. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. 10:34 is the time. This is interesting from Jeremy, who's in Sevenoaks. You said, James, you felt proud to be British watching yesterday's marches. I understand the context of why you said that, but listening to your last caller and all that her family and fellow Jews, it was Abigail, have recently been made to feel in Britain in 2023, and the veil she refers to that has made them feel so scared, targeted and isolated, I could not be more ashamed to be British. And there it is. I don't know quite how many people there are in the place that I find myself, very naively wishing that we could somehow find areas of broad agreement. And I don't think we can at the moment. I don't think we can, except on the beauty of yesterday's show of solidarity. And that's why it was so cleverly and carefully conducted. Because if it was a march about people currently being bombed every day in the, thousands and thousands of dead, I don't think you could have conducted and this is where Amanda helped me frame my thoughts better than I could have done on my own. You couldn't have had the same sense, the same feeling of calm and solidarity if it were about people currently being bombed to death. So there are two I think, irreconcilable phenomena unfolding here. And you know what I'm like. I'm an idiot. I want to try and reconcile them. I don't know why. We do it most days, don't we? We try and make some sense of what. Sometimes you just can't. We may even go further in the next hour and start looking at the sense and sensibility of the ceasefire or the pause that's currently underway. We haven't talked about it for a while, partly because the psychic toll it takes on all of us is so much, and I think increasingly probably because it is so hard to edge towards any form of clarity, which is normally what unites us every morning, isn't it? 10:36 is the time. Anyway, back to the beauty of yesterday's events and the profundity, the importance of them for you. Damon's in Hemel Hempstead. Damon, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello.
I was one of the volunteer stewards yesterday.
Fantastic. Did you have a high-vis vest?
I did have it was a lovely light blue high-vis vest.
Excellent.
And, we got there very early, and I was able to speak to many, obviously not 100,000 people, but a lot of people that were turning up.
You need to put your vest on, mate. You've got some crowd control issues going on in the background there.
There's nothing to control. Everybody was in. They were as one. It was quite amazing. But the beauty was, so we had 200 stewards there. There was a group of 30 Nepalese that came along to volunteer as stewards for the day.
Amazing.
And talking to people, I spoke to one guy, just a white British guy in his 60s.
Yeah.
He said it was the first demonstration, first show, whatever it may have been, that he's ever been on in his mid-60s. And he felt the need to because, obviously never again. He never grew up in it, but obviously hearing about it from his parents. And he just wanted to make sure that the Jews of this country knew that the people of Britain wouldn't let it happen again. And I think we needed to hear that.
Shoulder to shoulder. Shoulder to shoulder is the phrase. Was there a moment in the day when you felt something shift inside you? Because you got quite a few plates spinning as a steward. Was there a moment where you just thought, oh, my goodness?
100%. I stood quite near the beginning of the march, but we were static. We watched everybody walk past us.
Right,
and the sheer numbers
that's the power.
Shifted me.
Yeah.
The sheer numbers. Watching 100,000 people walk by you all on one side was just absolutely unbelievable. It was an amazing sight.
Oh, whoa. You've got to get your stewarding skills back up and running now.
No, I succeeded yesterday. I'm failing today today.
It's because you haven't got your vest on, Damon. I told you that already. Thank you. I shall let you attend to your duties at home. There is something, I mean, whatever it is, whether it's a cathedral or a football stadium, something about a swell of humanity, a huge surge, a swell of humanity is so powerful, and it has been powerful on the previous marches in solidarity with Palestinian people. But for Jews who have felt perhaps lonely, is the word I'd reach for, having spoken to you since the terror attack of October the 7th, lonely. And in some sense for British Jews, I think perhaps even abandoned. The stories I'm told, and I get sent quite a lot of letters, emails, as well as taking your calls. And I know that one of the biggest things has been the lack of compassion and understanding from people that you know very well, people to whom you are close. I can make sense of it. The experience of a British Jew in this country is, it is different from historical experiences. So it's hard for your neighbours, your school friends, your colleagues. It's hard to understand that there's more to it than the fear in the moment, that there is the fear of history repeating itself. And yet, I think until we spoke to Amanda, I'd kind of overlooked the fact that diminishes with each generation. And then when you witness things that you've witnessed in the last 50 days, it begins to come back again. 10:39 is the time. Adam's in Southend. Adam, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
My family and I went for 3 reasons yesterday.
Yeah.
One, my sister lives in Israel.
Okay.
And from the experience of weeks of the first thing you do every morning is waking up is to phone her, check she's alive.
Yes.
It was the least I could do, and it meant a lot to her that we were standing up to be counted. The second thing is that the thing that, it's impossible to not draw parallels to 1930s Germany. The thing that we've all our family said is the silence from people in the face of anti-Semitism is deafening.
That really upsets me. I don't want to argue with you. I want to feel a little bit better about being British, I think, than that portrayal allows. And I do think that because the retaliation started so quickly, the space in which that silence would not have been silence was taken away, Adam. I really do. I think that post-October the 7th, the room for empathy, sympathy and understanding was squeezed by the almost immediate bombardment of Gaza, wasn't it?
It was, but it's silence in the face of anti-Semitism, not about what's going on in Israel.
Okay.
In the UK. It's and of course it's not a malicious thing. It's that if you're not living in that world,
it's a lack of empathy. It's a lack of understanding, really.
Yeah. It's like my dad always, when we were growing up, always used to turn around to us and say, never underestimate the power of someone to turn around and call you pardon my language, a bloody Jew.
Yes.
And of course, me being a teenager and you were like, don't be silly, it's not like that anymore. Unfortunately, now it is like that for us. That is now our experience.
It's back, as it were.
Yeah. And the third reason we went is that I kind of liken the pro-Palestinian marches to the Polish builders' experience of Brexit.
Yeah.
The people who voted weren't being racist, but what happened was it gave permission to people who are racist to actually suddenly start saying it out loud.
Gosh.
And the pro-Palestinian marches, whilst the significant majority aren't anti-Semitic, their existence is given permission.
They provide camouflage for anti-Semitism.
And permission, I'd say, rather than camouflage, given permission to suddenly say things out loud. And this was our way of saying, actually, if people on the street give you permission, people on the street revokes that permission.
Or at the very least resist it. At the very least resist it. I hadn't thought of it that way. It is what happens, isn't it? I mean, it's human nature, I suppose, that people will always go a little bit further or a lot further than the majority. And what we have to be careful about, I think, and what the newspapers deliberately don't try to do is resist the temptation to let the minority define the majority, which is where the Brexit parallel, because I did wonder where you were going with that for a moment, Adam. So, and I'm James O. Brexit, so I'm always bringing it into everything. But that's it, isn't it? Don't let a minority define the majority. One of the lovely things about yesterday that there was no polluting minority to malign the reputation of the majority. Well, apart from little Tommy Ten Names turning up, but the organisers had specifically asked him not to, so that it's a completely different kettle of fish. From
I did feel a little uncomfortable sitting there listening to Robert Jenrick's speech, because I'm quite upset by being represented by someone who wants to paint over cartoon characters because we're too welcoming. But
gosh, that's a really good point. I'd missed that. Yeah, that's a little bit double standards, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and there's a lot of that going away. And I mean, I have to thank you for your book, because I've read I've listened to your recent book on audiobook, actually, not read it yet.
Thank you.
And previously, I'd heard a speech of an absolutely wonderful support of Jews in Israel from Douglas Murray, who I was unaware of before. Now I've read your book, I'm completely dismissing myself from him, because I now know the truth about. And that's the thing that I felt a lot from the beginning, is a lot of some of the people who are most vocal supporters are people I don't want in my corner.
That some people have made that point much more powerfully than I've managed to, and Robinson and Murray often at the top of the list of be careful which friends who support you choose at times like this. It's been written about at some length, but thank you. I take that as a compliment, Adam, even in these curious times. It is coming up to 11:15. I mean, that's the point, isn't it? Is that if you're dealing with someone who's described the Holocaust as the Germans getting nationalism a little bit wrong, or words to that effect, then you're probably not dealing with somebody who feels some of these issues as keenly as you might hope. 11:15 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. More of your calls after this. It is 10:49. I don't think this is whataboutery, and the first line certainly qualifies the contributor to comment. I'm a British Jew, James. I'm the son of Holocaust refugees. I wasn't there yesterday, but I don't feel the significance of it out here in the Shires. That might be a typo. I'll read the rest of it. I think the reality of growing populism and the othering that it relies on, which Boris Johnson has arguably had such a key role in bringing into the mainstream, is such a danger that I don't feel reassured. Yeah, not a typo. Well argued as well. A march of all the people being othered would be something that I think might fill me with more hope. My cause is anti-othering and not just anti-Semitism. I get that, and I'm not Jewish, but I do think that there's a danger of letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. And yesterday was very special. But yeah, that's a valid echo, isn't it? That's a valid caveat. Or is it, actually? I don't know. In the context of the now, I think yesterday needed to be done and not to be extended to all other isms. It was a specific pushback against specific acts and actions. So I don't know, but I wanted to read that out because it just highlights once again how dangerous it is to try and see this as a binary issue, which reminds you, did you see Doctor Who on Saturday? Absolute classic. David's in Salisbury. David, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Firstly, I'm a first-time caller, and
very welcome.
So apologies. A bit nervous and also a bit emotional.
The emotion I will indulge. The nervousness I will not, because there's nothing to be nervous about. It's only me.
Thanks. Well, this is probably the first time I think it is the first time I've ever said it in my life. But I'm a British Jew.
Yes.
I've always done that. I've never been in a community of Jewish people, really. I grew up I was the only Jewish person in the school. So I've suffered anti-Semitism, and I kind of like to call it racism in some sense because I don't want it to be separated.
Yes.
But so I felt it all my life, and I've always been told by my father when I was a child, you've got to hide it, and don't always keep your head down, and don't talk about it. I think yesterday, unfortunately, I flew back into the UK yesterday,
right.
From working abroad, and I actually felt quite sad coming back to the UK. I was quite nervous coming back, because I don't feel safe being back in the UK, which I find quite incredible, to keep feeling this.
When did that start?
I think it definitely has got worse since the troubles in Israel. I think that's when it has got worse. It's always been a little bit there. I've always been kind of cautious.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely got worse since the troubles. And it's interesting, even sorry.
No, sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted you then, but so were you worried that the march might have come under attack or something like that? Just what we...
Yes.
Yes, okay. Quite a few people were worried about that, judging by my inbox, actually. But from whom?
Well, I think this is...
Anti-Israel. Yeah, okay. So it wouldn't have been a traditional far-right attack. It wouldn't have been the National Front turning up or the brown shirts like it was in 1936. But it might have been people who have allowed their opposition to what Israel is doing in Gaza to become a form of anti-Semitism, a form of racism. I think you're right. We must call it what it is as well.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think this is the miseducation as well of not just Israel, but Jewish people as well. There's this kind of picture which is being kind of presented over history.
Yes.
And I don't think that's ever been kind of tackled and ever been kind of cleaned up. That makes sense?
Yes. What do you mean? The difference between being Jewish and being a absolutely
Israeli.
Well, not just Israeli, but a passionate supporter of Likud, for example, or of Benjamin Netanyahu's policies.
Absolutely. And also
that's the biggest bit that's missing always from the. And I sometimes wonder whether our media is complicit in that absence of clarity.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think they are, and I think this is again. It comes down to the whole education part, and it's hard. I understand it's hard. I mean, I had a penny drop moment in beginning of the year where my close friends who are not Jewish. I don't really have any close friends who are Jewish. and they were doing a show, and it had a swastika flag, and it really affected me in the show.
Right.
And they didn't get it. They didn't understand the deep kind of pain that has.
Yeah.
And for me, that kind of had a little point where I went, I understand now when black people say, you don't understand because you're not in my skin.
Yeah.
And it was similar to that kind of, it was a penny drop for me where I thought, I understand that now, because they don't understand what it's like to be Jewish.
Yeah.
They don't get that feeling that there's that deep kind of narrow pain that runs through us.
That's so well put, because you can intellectually empathise, but you can never feel it. You can never feel it in the same way.
And that hurts me, because people really need to understand and feel that, not just from a Jewish point of view, but from any point of view.
I think you can grow it. I think you and I share some hope and faith in this. I think you can massively improve the understanding. You may never reach the point of full reflection, full empathy. You can never, know exactly what it would be like to walk in your shoes, but you can get better and better and better at understanding it.
Absolutely. And this has been, even ringing you up today has been really hard for me.
I can tell.
To actually mention that I'm Jewish has been quite tough.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be.
No, it really shouldn't. And in some ways, you're carrying the burdens of your father's generation. And while some of those burdens obviously still exist and have had a bit of a comeback in recent weeks and in recent years, that there is, I think you probably heard Amanda in Finchley talking about a different experience from you, actually, almost a generational dilution of those burdens, or a lightening of those burdens, but they're always there. I understand what you're saying. What then, in a couple of sentences, what shifted for you yesterday when you saw those scenes?
I think it's a strength of actually we don't have to hide. I think the solidarity and actually the humility of it. The humility of how people acted and not being ashamed of who they are.
And that, do you know what you've just done there? You've just knitted together the personal and the public in a really spectacular way, because you have hidden all your life in a way.
Yeah.
And then yesterday, out and proud, I think is the phrase, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
David.
So it was a moment. I wish I was there.
Of course.
But
in a way, you were actually.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the point about solidarity and public displays like that. Thank you, David. Gosh, that's very special. Just referring back to something that Adam said about a writer called Douglas Murray, one of Andrew Neil's house elves over at The Spectator. The bit he refers to is a speech he gave at the National Conservative Conference, saying that you shouldn't be ashamed to hold nationalist views just because the Germans mucked up twice in a century, which it's hard to see how that's not a reference to the Holocaust. Tony's in Borehamwood. Tony, what would you like to say?
Oh, good morning.
Hello.
I'm not a political person.
Yes, you are. We're all political people. Some of us realise it more than others, that's all.
Okay, I'll concede. But the reason I'm calling is because I'm a British Jewish person who attended the rally yesterday.
Yes.
And I'm today bathing in an afterglow.
I can hear it in your voice. You're bouncing, aren't you?
No, the dog's bouncing. I'm trying to calm him down. He's excited that I'm on the radio.
Oh.
It was all about peace and positivity and letting the wider public know that we don't deserve the anti-Semitism that we seem to currently be on an increased receiving end of.
Yeah.
And I think that message was profoundly communicated yesterday. The numbers of people who were there as a proportion of the Jewish population and the representation by other wider communities was heartwarming. Mm. And I came from a similar stance to one of your earlier callers, Amanda, who echoed a lot of what I was feeling. But it's a very, very positive message that we felt a part of, and it was a moment of great pride. And also, I wanted to add that the campaign against anti-Semitism played a blinder. They organised the entire event, I would say flawlessly.
Yes.
And
Yes,
I would also like to...
You should give the police a shout as well, probably, because
you've taken the words out of my mouth.
I do
James.
apologise, Tony. It just occurred to me that they've had, they get it from all sides, don't they? Sometimes, but they seem to have.
Sometimes they do. But we engaged with a couple of policemen while we were waiting to actually start marching,
yes.
And we just said how much we appreciated their presence, and along the march, whenever we came into close physical contact with a police person, we'd just say, "Thank you for being here. We really are grateful." And I think maybe they appreciated that. I'd like to think that they did.
Do. No, I can tell you that
but
they do.
we felt it genuinely because they were attentive and they answered our questions. And I was asking, because I was concerned, like many others, if there were likely to be counter-protesters, and if so, would we encounter them on our route? And the firm answer was there are counter-protests, but they are segregated so far away from where you're walking that you will not experience any of their chants or anything like that.
Which is, I haven't seen any coverage of that, actually, of counter-protests. I
don't think it was a significant element of the day.
But you're the so yes, of course, and it was clear to see, and every caller has reflected that. And my obsession with right-wing newspapers, though, so I have to bring it in at some point. Because you're not the
headline, yeah.
Well, that's not ideal, but you've got, I think, people turning up more fearful of the prospect of violence than they should have been, and that has probably been created by the magnification of the elements on the pro-Palestinian marches that were toxic. The newspapers, by focusing in on them, created an atmosphere of fear that thankfully was swiftly dissipated on the streets of London yesterday.
I think yesterday did prove that we can march and safely, and I'm hoping that will translate to a scenario going forward where we can coexist with all our peace-loving compatriots rather than be constantly looking over our shoulder, which is how we have felt always, but particularly emphasised since October 7th.
Yeah, and again, I think there are a variety of reasons for that, but it doesn't really matter what they are because the reality of what you describe is irrefutable. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, everybody, that hour. You can tell I do sometimes approach those conversations with my heart very much, well, in my mouth, actually, not on my sleeve, because it is so tricky. But I should have trusted you a lot more. And I'm going to have to do so again in the next hour because we will now turn our attention to the reality of life on the ground in Gaza and in Israel, and the curious question of when is a ceasefire not a ceasefire, and probably even the hardest question of all at the moment, which is how does this end? It's 11:02. And it is 6 minutes after 11. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where I suspect, like me, you're probably a bit confused about what is now happening between Israel and Hamas. The third exchange of hostages and prisoners between Hamas and Israel took place yesterday, with Joe Biden expressing hope that the truce would be extended beyond today. The feeling is, I think, that Israel considers its campaign to be far from over. Benjamin Netanyahu, whose position is fragile anyway, but who I think sees a continuing campaign as consolidating his hold on power, said, "We are continuing until the end, until victory. Nothing will stop us," which I really think demands that we ask what that is. We will continue until the end. We are continuing until the end. What is the end? 0345 6060 973. We may throw out some other questions to ask in the meantime. Some of the scenes were just beautiful. Some of the scenes of reunion were incredibly powerful. But again, the eggshells come out, the tightrope comes out. You're not supposed to feel as moved by the release of a Palestinian child, some of whom I think were jailed for throwing stones, as you are by an Israeli child who were captured for doing nothing. So you can see that there's a difference there, but is it a massively profound difference? A family denied unity and then unity restored. It's moving objectively until, or before you find out where those families were born or what star they were born under. So there's one question I want to ask, and if this is wrong or crass, then just tell me, right, and we'll move on. But why didn't this happen sooner? Why, when we are understandably celebrating and sighing with relief at the truce, which is probably not going to last significantly beyond tomorrow, and the exchange of hostages, today we should see more handed over, 50 hostages held by Hamas and others in Gaza, hopefully, and some prisoners held currently in Israel, women and children held in Israel. Someone objected to the use of the word children yesterday. That's what I mean about eggshells. They are people under 19. I said, well, we call them children. But someone objected to the use of the word children yesterday. Genuinely, someone I know. And I don't get that, I'm sorry. But why didn't this happen sooner? You can question the numbers, but you can't question the general direction of traffic. About 13,000 people have been killed in 7 weeks. About 12,000 were recorded by Iraq body count as having been killed in Iraq in the first year of the US-led invasion in 2003. The estimates vary from 1,000 to 2,000 of the number of Hamas fighters who have been killed, but the total is believed to be about 30,000. And you can tell that Hamas is still a viable fighting force because they're negotiating over the hostage releases. So what's the end now? I mean, is it the end? What is the end? These are two incredibly difficult questions. When we started calling for a truce or a ceasefire, we were told that you couldn't possibly have one because Hamas would regroup. So what's changed? Aid could get in. That to me is that's the almost unbearable humanity, actually, or human angle. The aid goes in and then the bombing starts again. It's like boxers. The bell goes, but there's no referee to stop the fight. The bell goes. You can have your cuts patched up, or you can have a squirt of water in your face. But there's no referee to stop the fight. You're going to get pushed back out into the ring in 5 minutes' time, and the fella in the other corner, he's not got a scratch on him. In the context of this specific bout, this specific battle, I can't get past that. I can't get past that, so I'm not going to try. We'll talk about it. That's when. How do you process emotionally or intellectually this concept of a truce so that aid can get in? And then the bombing starts again. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. The end would involve the return of all the hostages, but that doesn't seem true anymore either, does it? Seems to me that with the caveat that some of them are held by groups other than Hamas, we're now on a path where it looks as if the kidnappers would be prepared to hand over everybody that they're currently holding. And do you think Israel would stop then? No. This idea that, on one day it must continue, the attacks must continue because we must get the hostages out. And you sort of found yourself going, well, hang on a minute, aren't you more likely to kill them the more you bomb these areas? And the hostages' families were deeply unimpressed by Netanyahu's approach to the plight of their family members. And then it was, no, we must eradicate Hamas, which is contradictory, really, because if you're dead set on eradicating Hamas, you're almost certainly going to endanger, if not take the lives of some of the hostages that are held by Hamas. So there's just no sense, is there, anymore in any of this? I don't know if there ever was. But those are the questions I've got for you. What does, if Netanyahu says we carry on until the end, what does that mean? 0345 6060 973. What does that mean? What do you think that means, regardless of where you sit on this issue or on the history of this conflict? What do you think that Benjamin Netanyahu means? So it's not what do you mean. We've had that phone in before. What do you think he means when he says we will not stop? There is a sense, I think, now that the world wants it to end. There is a sense, certainly coming from the Americans, who are absolutely crucial, the only really crucial country in these contexts. Joe Biden, in a phone call, apparently expressing hopes of a halt to the offensive. Netanyahu responding in Gaza by stating, "We are continuing until the end. Nothing will stop us." What do you think Benjamin Netanyahu means when he says we will continue until the end? That's the 30 minutes after 11. That is the question that I want you to work with this hour. What do you think he means? I don't know that we're going to open up Idiot's Corner, but I'll just give you a little flavour of what I deal with on days like this, in case you wonder why I sometimes sound so beleaguered. Here's Ryan saying, "It's disgusting you claim that children throwing stones at the military power, oppressing and imprisoning them are not equivalent in their innocence to Jewish children. You're sick." I was trying to express my view that they are equivalent in their innocence, except that one threw stones and one didn't. So the question becomes, how big a deal you think throwing stones is? I don't think it's a big deal, Ryan. But equally, you're perfectly entitled to consider that I'm sick. What does the end mean? And I think we have to ask this question now. And I think, to be honest, even if you're supportive of the continuing offensive, you have to answer, what do you think, Benjamin? I wonder whether people are hiding from it. We've gone through phases where the justification for the attacks has changed. So it begins with a form of retaliation after the terror attack of October the 7th. And you'd have to be made of different stuff from me not to think that retaliation was both necessary and justified. But the question we started asking pretty much on October the 8th was how much? How much is justified? I don't think it's semantics, and I don't think it's unfair to ask people in favour of the continuing bombardment what figure is too high. 13,000 dead people now. 13,000 dead humans in a country where the population is so decimated that the average age is much lower than the international average. So you're looking at a lot of children who are dead. 13,000, still not enough. Netanyahu wants more. He will continue until the end. What is the end? We're at the 13,000 mark. What is the end? So you move then from the retaliation to the claim that we must rescue the hostages. Well, it looks to me now as if the leaders of the Hamas death cult are horse trading, human trading, and are prepared to continue to do so. I wonder whether they, in their sick way, are thinking mission accomplished. You know, we've got now a new generation of young Palestinians who have seen carnage and destruction on a scale that they would not have been able to conceive of before. So the next generation of fighters is secure. And yet Israel then says, well, we must eradicate Hamas. I have no idea what Benjamin Netanyahu means when he says the end, but the only answer I've got that fits all of the necessary requirements is that he wants to raise the Gaza Strip to the ground. What else can he mean? You tell me. 0345 6060 973. It's such a strange phrase. It's such a haunting phrase. Nothing will stop us. What does that mean? What do you think he means? We are continuing until the end, until victory. Nothing will stop us. When you consider that hostages are now being returned and that 13,000 Palestinians are dead, the question becomes ever more urgent. And also, when you consider that Joe Biden has expressed hopes for a ceasefire, for a longer ceasefire. I don't want to do the semantics and the philosophy of when is a ceasefire, not a ceasefire, when is a truce, not a truce. But what does Benjamin Netanyahu mean? when he says we will continue until the end. Because at the moment, worst case scenario is that for every 13 people you've killed, you've maybe got one Hamas terrorist. So what number is the most pertinent? The total, 13,000? How many is too many? Or the ratio, 13 innocent deaths for one guilty man? I don't know, but I want to know what you think he means. And again, as ever, on this subject, we will do our level best to tread carefully, but you must also be aware that this is your programme too. So if you do feel, well, if you feel I get something wrong, not in the normal way, but as in going to places or saying things that should not be said, then do let me know. And I will give your contribution full respect. It's 11:18. 21 minutes after 11 is the time. And it's a weird one, this, but I think I can only do this on Mondays and Tuesdays. I think by the end of the week, I sort of have a fatigue, a mental and emotional fatigue if we've been covering difficult news. It's fine when there's no difficult news, but when was the last time there was no difficult news? If we're covering difficult news together, and I'm very alive to your sensitivities, then it can be quite a draining experience. I'm not going to claim it's harder work than being a builder, because that went so well last time. But I am going to point out that you need a level of psychic energy. If you do it in a way that I have to do it, which is care. So I asked this question: what does the end look like? And I'm terrified of what the possible answer to that might be. I'm not just sort of skimming over it to get the phones ringing. I sometimes wish I could do that, because I wouldn't feel so heavy when we're in the middle of conversations like this one. But we've got to have them. Mush is in Birmingham. Mush, Benjamin Netanyahu says we are continuing until the end. What's the end?
Morning, James.
Hello.
First time caller.
You're very welcome.
Love the show. I believe that it's going to end with the continued subjugation of the Palestinian people. That is what we've seen for the best part of 70 odd years. A right-wing government is acceptable in most countries. It happens. We've seen it in the Netherlands over the weekend. But what we have here is an extreme right-wing government that doesn't let up. I say that, and of course, I saw the march yesterday with regards to anti-Semitism. Of course, I'm totally in support of that, and I believe in the right for Israel to defend itself, and the right for everybody to defend themselves. But this conversation also has to be taken with the knowledge that you have a subjugated people for a significant period of time. And anybody, James, if I put my hand on you and I squeeze hard, at some point you're going to push back. Is it wrong for you to push back? I don't think it is.
Well, you're not. You're justifying the October the 7th terror attack?
No, not at all.
Well, hang on. Well, that's pushing back.
Well.
Also, we're going a little bit off. Well, actually, no, I can't let that slide. You can't. What do you mean by pushing back?
Well, what I mean to say is that you've got a subjugated people. For example, in the West
Don't repeat yourself. What do you mean by pushing back? Because a lot of people listening will think you're referring to the conversation that we're having, which is about the terror attacks.
No, not at all. What I'm saying is that you have Palestinian people for 70 years.
Yes, I know this.
Who, for the best part of that time, have given no right of self-determination. They have no army. They have no peaceful activities. They have nothing to live for in many respects. And you have an extreme right-wing government who take up arms at every opportunity against them.
I know. With respect, everyone knows all this, and you've said it 3 times now. So
well, everyone does know that, but do
so
they
what,
know?
what do you think the end is for Benjamin Netanyahu? Because you're just at the moment saying it'll just carry on as before.
If we look at the indigenous people, the Red Indians in America, we've just seen that population diminish to a point where it's relatively negligible.
Yeah.
And
so you think that's the plan? That's what he means by the end. He wants to wipe out the Arab population of Gaza.
Because I think you would then say, well, that's genocide, isn't it? And I don't think it will be a point.
You're dancing on too many pins, Mush. I don't know how often you listen to the show, but you can say what you want to say, mate. You don't have to worry about how I might respond, or what? Because the question is, Benjamin Netanyahu has said we will continue until the end. What do you think the end is? Because all you've given me is the past.
I think it will just be the ongoing persecution of the people to a diminished number.
Okay. I think you want to go further than that, but it's for your own reasons you won't. I'll read you what Max Hastings, who interviewed Benjamin Netanyahu in the 1970s when he was writing an official biography of Netanyahu's brother Yoni. He says, at Bibi Netanyahu's dinner table in Jerusalem, I think that's I listened with crawling dismay to Bibi talking about the future of his country. In the next war, if we do it right, we'll have a chance to get all the Arabs out, he said. We can clear the West Bank, sort out Jerusalem. He joked about the Golani Brigade, the Israeli infantry force in which so many men were North African or Yemenite Jews. They're okay as long as they're led by white officers, he grinned. And that's Max Hastings writing in the 1970s. It's been again underreported in this country, but if you wanted to go where I think you wanted to go, but were reluctant to say so, perhaps that would help you. It certainly informs my fears that Netanyahu might be embarked upon something much grislier than many of his supporters in the West are prepared to acknowledge. Roger is in Nottingham. Roger, what would you like to say?
Good morning. I think the previous caller was being a bit coy about it. He called for a genocide. Whether he uses, flowery language to beat around the bush and not say anything, so not say as much such, he's
we don't need. I'm not uncomfortable with the accusation of genocide. I'm not uncomfortable with you making it.
So I think he wants to commit genocide.
Right. So you can say that, and I can say that is what you think he means when he says the end.
I think that's what he wants to do. He's said it in using references. He's beholden to a right-wing segment of his government to want to push this further. And he needs to make sure he stays in power, because ultimately he wants to stay in power. But there's also an enthusiasm, as you just said, in the 70s he was talking about this. And getting rid of the entire Arab, I say that in inverted commas, population of Palestine or Israel, however you want to call it, is by any ways. You either displace them through ethnic cleansing or you kill them, which is genocide. So which way do you want to go? It's not really difficult to basically equate that. And I think it needs to be, the words need to be said. There's very much a little bit of a cowardice perspective from
it's a hideous word in this context, largely because of the genocide that was attempted upon. No, I know. You have to let me speak, Roger.
I'm so sorry. There's a bit of a delay. Go ahead.
There is a weight to the word genocide in this context because of the attempt of the genocidal annihilation of the Jewish people less than 100 years ago. But we're talking about the explanation that fits the words that he is using. The response would come back to say, no, my priority is to rid the world of Hamas. And then the bit that's not said out loud is, and if that involves the eradication of everybody in Gaza, then so be it. And that's the point at which you, I think, reach for the word genocide.
I don't think this is about just Gaza, is it? I don't know why we seem to segment a significant part and ignore a significant part of what's going on. In the West Bank last night, there was 8 Palestinians killed. What ceasefire are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, and Hamas aren't in the West Bank. So I understand. Again, you're doing it again.
Let me finish. Let me finish.
Okay, but you asked me a question, and I'm trying to answer it.
Well, it was rhetorical.
We don't do rhetorical questions, Roger.
Okay, go ahead.
So the answer to your question is that the ceasefire, then you just said, what ceasefire are we talking about? We're talking about the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel while the hostage negotiations continue, and Hamas are not in the West Bank. So if it's rhetorical, you already know the answer. Why are you trying to mislead my listeners?
Well, I'm not trying to mislead your listeners. I wanted them to be educated about what's going on.
Well, I'll handle that, mate.
Every time there's a conversation about killing Palestinians, what tends to happen is we throw Hamas and Gaza into the equation and we ignore what's going on in the West Bank.
No one's ignoring what's going on in the West Bank. We're talking about what Benjamin Netanyahu said yesterday about the continuing offensive in Gaza. That is what we are talking about. We can add as an aside, of course, the ceasefire doesn't apply in the West Bank, and 8 Palestinians were killed yesterday by Israeli forces, but it doesn't address the question that the phone-in is currently addressing.
I think, James, you're right, but I don't think that's the full picture, because the Gaza...
Well, then, when I ring your show, then we can address the picture that you think we should be addressing. But my question to you is, what do you think he means? You can't go any further than genocide. We probably should have just left it there. It's a well-supported position that you have shared. It fits the parameters of the question that I have asked. What does Benjamin Netanyahu mean when he says we will continue until the end? You believe he means when he's killed every Arab in Palestine.
I resent the word Arab. I don't know why you keep using the word Arab.
All right, what word do you prefer?
The word Palestinian.
Okay, so the reason I use the word Arab, the word Arab is because that's the word that Benjamin Netanyahu used in the 1970s when he was talking to Max Hastings in the quote that I shared shortly before you came on.
Sure, and you know that better than that, because the word Arab at the moment is used to delineate the people of Palestine from that land, and it's to say they are Arab invaders, and it's used by right-wing commentators to say that those people don't belong there.
Well, I'm afraid
it justifies
I'm afraid that I was
that
Roger. I don't understand what you think you've done now. You've come on a show, you've made an interesting point, you've backed it, but you're trying to pick a fight in an empty room. Arab is the word that Netanyahu used. You're doing it again.
It's just
my show. What a waste of time. What a waste of my time and a waste of everybody's time.
Why are you trying to, stop me from making my point?
I'm not. I'm trying to urge you to make one.
I have done, and I think
objecting to the use of the word
right terminology.
Okay, you're off again. So Netanyahu used the word Arab. We were discussing what was going on in his mind. In his mind, the word Arab would be used. Do you understand that now?
I do, and I'm trying to explain to you why he's using the word.
Well, we know why he's using the word, don't we? We know why he's using the word because we've read the text from which Max Hastings' quote was lifted.
Okay, so we agree
Roger,
on that.
We're 3 minutes late for the news. I sense that there was an interesting conversation to be had here, and I'm willing to take at least 4% of the blame for the fact that we didn't have it. Thomas Watts is here with the headlines. 11:36 is the time. I really do think that this should have been much, much, much more widely reported, and I do think it creates an enormous problem for people who talk about the eradication of Hamas and don't really go towards what that is likely to cost. If Benjamin Netanyahu has gone on the record to voice his support for the prospect of getting, in his words, all the Arabs out, then the question of what he means in the context of the current conflict, when he says we are continuing until the end, until victory, nothing will stop us, becomes, I would say, close to terrifying, I think. And conscious though I am, even at the Nuremberg trials, the use of the word genocide was controversial, even at the Nuremberg trials. It's an incredibly loaded and difficult word. But if Netanyahu, and this book by Max Hastings, Going to the Wars, published by Macmillan in the year 2000, an official biography of Yoni Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu's brother. I just find this, I meant to share it with you sooner, but as you can probably tell, I do find the pinhead dancing, these conversations, so difficult because I'm both contributor and referee, which is, I'm not expecting you to get your violins out by any stretch of the imagination, but it can be quite exhausting. But this is surely this is relevant. At Bibi Netanyahu's dinner table in Jerusalem, I listened with crawling dismay to Bibi talking about the future of his country. In the next war, if we do it right, we'll have a chance to get all the Arabs out, he said. We can clear the West Bank, sort out Jerusalem. He joked about the Golani Brigade, the Israeli infantry force in which so many men were North African or Yemenite Jews. And he said, they're okay as long as they're led by white officers, he grinned. Look, people change. But imagine for a moment that Benjamin Netanyahu hasn't changed very much from when he said that to one of the most respected historians in the UK, one of the most respected British historians who went on to edit the Daily Telegraph long before it began its decline into the nonsense that it publishes today. So let's imagine that Netanyahu hasn't changed that much since then, and then ask yourself what he means when he says we are continuing until the end, until victory, even as hostage negotiations achieve success. 11:39 is the time. Bulama is in Lambeth. Bulama, what would you like to say?
No, thank you, James.
Very welcome.
I think Netanyahu knows that there is no end to this, and he's just saying this so he would continue to deploy his soldiers to kill and to maim and to displace people from their homes. We know that this situation has been going on for decades, and unfortunately, like you said on the top of the program, what has happened over the past 7 weeks, 13,000 people killed, would only arm Hamas to mobilize, recruit, and radicalize more young people. And it's not just Hamas, James. I was looking at groups in Africa, and you just can't imagine how Al-Qaeda affiliates across Africa are using the Palestinian situation, the attacks in Gaza, to recruit young people and to mobilize money and to raise funds. So Netanyahu knows that there is no end in sight. And when he says no one can stop them or nothing can stop them, he's just bluffing, because we know that when you ask what changed between the period when they were saying there cannot be cessation of hostilities or peace talks with Hamas, we know that it was U.S. that changed the situation. It was Joe Biden that confronted him and made him to do it. We know that Joe Biden did it for political reasons. He saw how he's sinking in the polls in the U.S. Because people still have conscience and they know that what's going on is wrong. He then pressured Netanyahu to do what he did in terms of the recent post that we saw. And so if the U.S. wants Israel to stop killing innocent people in Gaza, they would stop. If the U.S. would continue to pay lip service to the two-state solution, if the U.S. would continue to pay lip service to the plight of the Palestinian civilians, then Netanyahu would continue because, he saw it as a carte blanche when we had the last conversation. It was only after Western leaders had made it clear to him that there are now red lines because of pressure, political pressure from the West, that he is now shifting ground.
So, but as a holding tactic rather than a tactical change. So what we see is a truce, almost as a fig leaf, as a purchase of time before he starts again, not as a change of intent or a change of tactic.
Yeah. The only way it will become change of intent or tactic is if the U.S. continues to stamp its feet on the ground to tell him you cannot continue. And of course, one reason why Netanyahu may be saying this is to provoke Hamas leaders to also make similar statements, so he can use his statements to galvanize support in the West, to say, look what they are saying. They are saying they would repeat this.
So, I hadn't thought of that. So, in many ways, him saying we are continuing until the end, nothing will stop us, you're suggesting is a counterbalance to Hamas leaders saying we will not stop attacking Israel. We will continue our attacks.
No, what I am saying is they have said that in the past. Said that. Now he's saying this in order to provoke more statements from them, more violent rhetoric from them, so he can use the violent rhetoric. Which gives him more justification
to continue. So I do enjoy talking to you. I enjoyed it enormously last time as well, if that's the right word to use. I wish we weren't having any of these conversations for obvious reasons. But there is an end. You say that there will be an end. It's just a question of what that will look like. And previous callers suggesting it will look like a return to where we were when it started, but with Gaza much diminished, to use a euphemism.
At least that's what Israel wants, if we were to go by what Israel wants. The reason why they cannot talk to Hamas, which makes sense, is that Hamas does not recognize the Palestinian, the Israeli state. But the Palestinian ambassador was last on at LBC, and she was asked by, I'm trying to remember the name of the presenter at 6 o'clock.
Andrew Marr.
Sorry?
Andrew Marr.
Yeah, Andrew Marr was asking her, would you enter into two-state solution talks with the LPO? And she said, no, Mahmoud Abbas and others, we will not sit down for a two-state solution talk with her. Why? She said because they did not condemn Hamas for the October 7th attack. Now, they would not sit with Hamas. The reason is that it is in Hamas charter that they do not recognize the Israeli state. The LPO recognizes the state. They want two-state solution. They want the Israeli government to sit down with them to fashion out the details of the two-state solution. But what excuse are they using? They are using the excuse that the LPO did not condemn Hamas, and therefore we will not sit with them, and therefore they are guilty by association by not condemning Hamas. Assuming that is true, you would then start to wonder, so who would they sit with? If we know that LPO members have been killed mercilessly by Hamas, they were poached from the Gaza Strip by being pushed from rooftops to die, and that's why they left the place. And just one more point, James. I don't know where you got the one Hamas fighter for every 13 innocent Palestinians, but if that statistics were to hold, then what we are talking about, I mean, the current estimate is that there are between 40 to 50,000 Hamas fighters. And if 13 innocent individuals are killed for each Palestinian fighter, then we are looking at 737,000 Palestinians dying before Israel can eradicate Hamas.
And this is, I mean, I got the numbers from Dan Saba's analysis in the Guardian today. So the Israelis military estimates it's killed between 1,000 and 2,000 Hamas fighters, and the figure they work on is that there's 30,000 in total. But I know you work in this field as well. These numbers are always going to be quite fluid, but your calculations are obviously correct. But that's the. I don't want to use a phrase like elephant in the room because it sounds trivial, but it is all boiling down, because all that we are left with ultimately is the insistence that we are here to eradicate Hamas.
Yeah,
and, it is. And the question then becomes, how many non-Hamas Palestinians are we prepared to kill in pursuit of that not necessarily even achievable goal? And that's where it almost the humanity disappears.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I can tell you, James, that if it continues at this rate, the only Palestinians you would leave are Hamas members, because no Palestinian would bear to see members of their families being killed, their homes being destroyed.
That's the bit that just makes so much sense to most outsiders, I think, in the idea you're going to eradicate the feelings that lead people to join Hamas by piling misery upon catastrophe upon carnage. I don't understand that, and I think people cling to that hope almost in defiance of their own intellect, Bilama. That almost, for reasons of history and for reasons of fear and for reasons of homeland safety, whatever you want to call it, you cling to the idea that there's something else going on, and you refuse to address the question of whether or not any price is too high in the pursuit of what Netanyahu does. So in his mind, finally, when he says the end, you think he's just blowing smoke, really. He's not got an actual meaningful destination in mind.
Yeah, he doesn't have any actual meaningful destination. He wants to provoke Hamas leaders to make similar statements so he can use it. He wants to continue to stay in power by continuing to show that he is trying to bring an end to Hamas. And this only reminded me, James, of one of your clips that went viral of the lady who claims that the military onslaught on Gaza was intended to free the hostages, which you clearly showed was not true. What we said in the beginning is now bearing fruit, and they are now seeing that the only way to free hostages and to bring calm to the Middle East is through negotiation. And they have got to find someone to negotiate with. If you are saying you cannot negotiate with Hamas, you must at least negotiate or sit down with the LPO. Otherwise, you would continue to perpetuate a situation that will continue to push people to the wall. And unfortunately, nasty, barbaric things might come out of that.
I'd add one final line to your analysis, which is, on a much more personal perspective for Netanyahu. For him, the end game, as Andrew has reminded me, is to achieve an outcome which keeps him in power and out of court. That's going to be playing a big part in his calculations as well at the moment.
Exactly. We know that the trouble he was in politically and legally before this situation unfolded, and he sees this as the smoke screen to continue in power. Unfortunately, politicians of this age, many of them are happy to stay in power at any cost.
At any cost. There it is. Bilama, thank you. Crikey, there's so much, isn't there, to process, but sometimes some people do manage to bring a clarity and an illumination to the to the complicated issues. AJ says, your current caller is brilliant. Why is he not in the UN? Someone who has so much common sense and understands situations. Well, I can tell you that Bilama is an esteemed academic whose work you can find out more about by just looking up Bilama Bukhati. And we've had the pleasure of him ringing in now on a couple of occasions. And on both occasions, I've come away feeling better informed, if not any more optimistic about the human condition. It's 11:54. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I don't know what the answer is, other than the ones that we have received. Perhaps there is another one, but it certainly, as Bilama just demonstrated pretty conclusively, the claim that it's all about the hostages just is now unsustainable. And if it then boils down to eradicating Hamas, then the question of how many innocent people need to die in pursuit of that not necessarily achievable goal is the only question really in town. I have some correspondents who sometimes get in touch with me privately because they've worked in this field, and they just allow me to share the fruits of their knowledge and the fruits of their understanding. So Netanyahu doesn't know what the end game will look like, but it would involve the complete military disablement of Hamas and the return of as many hostages as possible in exchange for as few prisoners as possible, and an administration in Gaza which he can present at home in Israel as preventing any future attack from there. So that would be a forced displacement and a grave international crime, possibly even genocide, if intent can be shown. That's the lesson from the Nuremberg trials. And my correspondent adds it's the duty of the USA, the UK and others to prevent such an outcome and create a future in Gaza which doesn't involve Hamas or, if at all possible, Netanyahu and his mates. 11:56 is the time. Henry Riley is here. There are other stories unfolding as we wrestle with this one.
Yes, it's Mayor Day, effectively, at the COVID inquiry today. You've got Sadiq Khan, the London Mayor, in front of Baroness Hallett and Mr O'Connor at the moment. And then later on today, you've got Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham, who respectively are the mayors of Manchester and Liverpool. But a lot of focus on Sadiq Khan at the moment, obviously, not just because of how much of a hotspot London was in the early stages of the pandemic, but that power tussle that he had with the government. He explains that from a very early point, his staff were having to get information from newspapers and they couldn't get it from the government.
The 23rd of January, you give a description of a question time event that you were conducting in London, and this was the first time you received a detailed briefing from your staff about COVID. Is that right?
It is, but I should just say my staff's knowledge of this was from open source data, from newspapers, from World Wide Web and so forth. It wasn't from a briefing from the government.
There were also a number of
I did this at the time. I couldn't believe it. He sat there, or he sat on Zoom. I can't remember whether we were socially distancing at the time. And I do that thing. My voice goes squeaky, Henry. It'll still happen to you as you get older. I go, well, you haven't seen them at all. And he go, no. I said, well, have they been on the phone? He go, no, they haven't even been. What do you mean? And he go, I know. But it's astonishing that the mayor of London, and we would sit there talking about Heathrow. What are they doing at the airports? He said, I don't know. They won't talk. No one's talking. I mean, it's just extraordinary.
Well, and more on the airports later on, because they were quite concerned that Sadiq Khan wasn't in any of these high-level discussions.
Yes.
In terms of the Cobra meetings, there were obviously a number that took place in February and in early March as well. Sadiq Khan made it clear that in terms of those Cobra meetings, he was not invited.
In February, there were Cobra meetings taking place. We knew nothing about these, and probably Paul Plant didn't either, because it's above his pay grade. The point being is that we're the capital city. We know what happened. Had we been aware of some of the things that the government were concerned about in February or March, we could have taken preventative action.
So there would have come a time where, judging by the sort of severity of the virus, the concerns about what may happen, you would have expected in parallel to your exchanges with PHE, to have started being briefed by central government, you say Downing Street, but that, as we'll come to see, didn't happen at that time, or in fact for some time later.
Absolutely. We were chasing the government for information. I've shared correspondence with me writing to the government saying, look, we've heard about this thing happening. What do we do?
So Sadiq Khan wasn't aware that these Cobra meetings were taking place. When he was aware they were taking place, he also was not invited.
The Mayor's Chief of Staff has asked whether Number 10 intend to invite the Mayor to the Cobra meeting regarding coronavirus on Monday, that's the 2nd of March. Given its large number of airports, hospitals and international visitors, London is, of course, potentially one of the most at-risk places. We can see that, in fact, on the same day, on the Friday, later on in the evening, the reply comes back, no, spoken to those leading, the Mayor will not be invited to the Cobra on Monday.
Now, the argument from Eddie Lister, who at the time was very senior in Number 10, was that if you invite Sadiq Khan, you have to invite Andy Burnham, Andy Street. But right. Sadiq Khan made the point that actually he'd be happy if all of the Metro mayors were there.
Claire Brunton says to emails saying she assumes the answer is no again. Then another email from Claire Brunton saying that it had been discussed at the 8:15 meeting and that the general view was that there is in fact an argument for you to be at the meeting. And then at the very top, Eddie Lister, you can't have him without Street, Burnham et al. Reference to the mayors of Birmingham and Manchester. Or is London more important than Manchester? What's your reaction to that?
It may well have been sensible to invite Andy Street, Andy Burnham and other Metro mayors to Cobra meetings rather than bilaterals. But secondly, they knew then, I knew subsequently, that London was different. I knew subsequently London was different because I was subsequently told that the pandemic was having an impact on London ahead of the rest of the country. So there is an argument for London to be treated differently.
And Sadiq Khan said in his view, if he was invited to those early meetings, he of course was expected to be the figurehead for London and therefore the response to the COVID outbreak. He thinks he could have saved lives.
It's horses for courses. In this particular case, I can see no explanation at all why, the GLA, the Mayor of London, we weren't around that table. I think lives could have been saved if we were earlier.
And just a few other things to run you past, James. Firstly, when the Mayor was finally invited to Cobra on the 16th, he revealed he was alarmed because, of course, by this point, he was only reading the newspapers and wasn't aware of any of the information from Downing Street. He then describes a meeting with Chris Whitty where he was genuinely shocked by what Chris Whitty was saying because that was the first he'd heard that there could be a global pandemic. Also, he said at one point that Mr Johnson was not aware that there were fines in other countries for breaching COVID restrictions. Sadiq Khan's Chief of Staff, Mr Bellamy, said that in Milan and in Paris they were fining people for breaching COVID rules. Sadiq Khan alleges that Boris Johnson had absolutely no idea that was taking place. And then lastly, there was a joint press conference planned between Boris Johnson and Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan supported that, saying, you're a libertarian, I'm a big advocate of human rights, it'd be very powerful for us to come together and advocate for this lockdown. He thought it was going to go ahead. He then got a call from Dominic Cummings, or a member of his staff got a call from Dominic Cummings explaining that it wouldn't be going ahead because of the financial markets.
Meaning that the lockdown wasn't going to go ahead, not the press conference.
The press conference wasn't going to go ahead because of the financial markets, because they didn't want to spook the financial markets into... Dominic Cummings wanted to wait until Friday. Very heavy.
Good Lord. And Andy Burnham later today, is it?
Andy Burnham later, and as well as Steve Rotherham as well from the Liverpool City.
Yeah, Henry Riley, many thanks indeed. It's 2 minutes after 12. It is 6 minutes after 12, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we can take a bit of a breather now and move into slightly different territory. Two of my all-time favourite subjects. If you had to make a list of my all-time favourite topics, what would you put on that list? Go on, you've been listening for long enough now. What would you put on that list? Class. I'm fascinated by class. Education. Well, Brexit. Don't be ridiculous. Never talk about Brexit. Favourites are books. I don't know, like if you think of a 12 o'clock topic when we're not necessarily as handcuffed to the news agenda as we tend to be at other times, particularly Friday at 12. Well, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud because there's two stories here. vying for my attention, vying for your attention. One about books, and the wonderful Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe revealing at the Booker Prize ceremony that she was essentially saved from despair during her captivity in Iran by reading a banned copy of The Handmaid's Tale, a remarkable story of a secret library being kept in prison. But I felt that perhaps it would be diminishing her testimony by using that as a launchpad into books that have meant an awful lot to us, because you're talking about someone really being saved from the grip of unbearable despair by a dystopian novel when she was living in a form of dystopia. And so I urge you to look at that and to read what Nazanin had to say, particularly about The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. They had an edition that had been translated into Farsi, and somehow it ended up in jail, even though it had been banned in Iran. It came into the prison through the post. And when we left, we all bequeathed books to the secret library in the ward to keep our stories alive for others to come, just like others left their books for us to survive. Just so powerful. So powerful. But the other thing, I'm fascinated by private education and education in general for a whole bunch of reasons. But let me tell you briefly what the main reason is. Accents. Yes, that's a very good point. Accents, here you go. People have started joining in. What are my all-time favourite subjects? Accents and telling us about your book, James. That's not very nice. Although, actually, my first book, How to Be Right in a World Gone Wrong, is available for one day only on Audible at $1.99 today. That is an incredible bargain. I must tweet that. Remind me to tweet it. Your favourite subject, James? Number 1, your recent book, and number 2, your previous book. That's incredible. I just did that. I just almost proved your point for you. I do like accents. Kate, I think, is joking when she says cars. Jackie is quite correct when she says shops. We do love talking about shops. Do you know why I love talking about shops? One of the great universals. Everyone has a relationship with shops, whether they realise it or not. Not everybody has a relationship with bridges. Thank you for that, from Bella. Brexit, Boris Johnson and yourself, says Adam in Walsall. Adam, I am a mere lens through which we examine the issues of the moment, and without acknowledging the existence of the lens, it would be a very strange business indeed. Is it bollards and the life and times of James? There's a theme emerging here, and I'm not sure I like it, Ash. Parking tickets, says Steve, who wins a prize. But yeah, you're all on it. Sort of in a similar vein. The Crown off the telly is facing fresh criticism, this time for reinforcing negative stereotypes about public schools. Now, part of my fascination with public schools is personal and part of it is political. So I believe that the ruling classes in this country are quite often unfit for purpose, but persuaded of their own supremacy by a couple of 100 years of an education system dedicated to persuading them of their own superiority. It confuses education with intelligence, and it allows mediocre men, and they are almost always men, mediocre men to consider themselves born to rule. The sense of entitlement that can come with a certain type of education in this country is frankly incredible. And I know because I had precisely that type of education. So that's part of my fascination with public schools. But it also plays into much broader questions of deference and class. I think we're held back as a population by deference and class. I think pigeonholing from a very early age and teaching children that some things are not for the likes of them is an appalling obstacle obviously to social mobility, but also to economic growth, at risk of sounding a little bit like Liz Truss. Just think about entrepreneurial flair and the idea of most of us, whatever class we're in, being slightly terrified, unless we inherited wealth, of going into business for ourselves, of setting up businesses ourselves. Not instead of doing a day job for most of us. It would start off as a side hustle, wouldn't it? But there's a wariness, I think, born largely of class. And then you've got the other problem of what you might loosely describe as the officer class. So you end up with people who've had a certain type of education being in charge of people who haven't, despite the fact that there's nothing innate or intrinsic to them that qualifies them to be of a superior status. 11 minutes after 12 is the time. The Crown is facing fresh criticism, this time for reinforcing negative stereotypes about public schools. So the chief executive of the Independent Schools Council says that the Netflix series depiction of public schools is frustrating and affecting public perception. So the school days of Harry and William at Eton in Windsor have been cited. King Charles also shown as being very unhappy at Gordonston in Scotland, which he was. He was utterly, utterly miserable there. But the complaint is, I think, that the world has changed. I never cease to be amazed, says the chief executive of the Independent Schools Council, how powerful the stereotype is. The reality is that we are a small sector with a few wealthy and really strong world-famous schools, which are a great export for the UK and good for business. It is hard to get that message out when people will watch The Crown again and be thinking of certain schools, and that is what we are up against, what people imagine independent schools to be. So here it is. I haven't been at school for 33 years. And I live in a country where I would suggest cautiously that public school stereotypes are still pretty accurate. Pretty accurate. Not that long ago, there was an education minister talking about a public school swagger. He was kind of admitting that you purchase something that is quite hard to pin down, but is probably best described as a form of self-belief that is not necessarily built upon particularly firm foundations. You have a swagger. Nicholas Soames rang in, I think, that day. We're going back a while now, to sing the praises of schools in his constituency that were not public schools, but which turn out, by Sir Nicholas's account, they turn out very fine, upstanding citizens. And I had the unfortunate duty of pointing out that he hadn't sent his own children to those schools. So they are clearly getting something from going to public school that they wouldn't have got from somewhere else. So there's a 33-year gap in my knowledge, a 3.5 decade long gap in my knowledge. What is the stereotype of a public school pupil? 0345 6060 973. I don't want this conversation by any stretch of the imagination to be confined to people who have lived it or been through it or sent their children to it. Quite the opposite, in fact. If I say to you, what's a public school stereotype? What do you say to me? What do you consider it to be? And don't just say Jacob Rees-Mogg. You've got to give me actual adjectives. You've got to give me modes of behaviour, characteristics, attributes or flaws, failings. What is the public school stereotype in the United Kingdom in 2023? 0345 6060 973. Right? And then the second question becomes, is it still true? Does it still apply? Tim Nicebert must be 25, 30 years old. Is that still a thing? So the public school portrayal in dramas like The Crown is reportedly unfair, according to people charged with trying to tempt as many parents as possible to send their children to that type of school. What is, for you, this is a very personal question, you. So I say public school stereotype, and you say what? 0345 6060 973. And I'm very conscious of my 3.5 decade gap in knowledge on this. I don't know whether things have got better or worse or not changed at all. My sample is limited. I don't know enough young people who've been through that type of education. And I'm talking specifically about the boarding schools of yore, the ones that you can name quite often. And the question of whether or not the stereotype still applies. Al's already piled in with entitlement and arrogance. My middle name's Al. So what is the stereotype for you? 0345 6060 973. And does it still apply? And in order to answer the second question, you have to be a little bit more up to date, perhaps, than I am. I like that. What is the stereotype now? Is it still the same as it was? You see the pictures of people in top hats being chased by urchins begging for a coin. It's not like that anymore, is it? So what is the stereotype? 0345 6060 973. And is the head of the Independent Schools Council correct when she says it's actually unfair to portray these schools in the way that they were 20 or 30 years ago when I went to one? 0345 6060 973. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. Promise. It's 12:16. 19 minutes after 12. I like this, Liam, but I don't know if it's fair So you might know 20 kids who went to public school, and one of them stands out because he is possessed of, this is Liam's list, extreme confidence, entitlement, and a belief that they've achieved everything themselves. And they also have a lack of empathy. But the other 9 you might not know because they're not wearing the tie or wearing bright red trousers, which a lot of you have claimed is part of the stereotype. So I just don't know. I don't know what you think the stereotype is, and I don't know whether it's fair to suggest that it still exists today. Let's start in Chester. Steve's there. Steve, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello. Well,
you did ring in, Steve. You did ring in.
Well,
you can't be surprised.
Every other time I've spoken to you, I've been on hold for a bit. Everything I'm going to say is pretty negative, and I know that's a generalisation. And
say what you see. Say what you see, like on Catchphrase.
Right, they live amongst us like an occupying army after a hideous defeat. They exploit us. You know, you see a farmer walking through his field and looking paternalistically at the cattle, fondly. He's going to kill them and turn them into money. And that's what these people are like with us.
Blimey, it's a bit strong.
We're a resource to them, a resource to be used, abused. Every time I've been mistreated badly, really badly, and left in the lurch, betrayed, it's not been by some hoodie with a knife on a street corner. It's been by a public schoolboy.
Really?
Whether directly in employment.
Can you give me an example? Well, you don't have to. I'm not zinging you. I'm just wondering what kind of thing.
Things like I'm self-employed and I work in construction. And I'm quite senior.
Yes.
You get excluded from the little group who's going to get the bonuses, even though the work largely depends on you.
Right.
There's these little cliques.
Yes.
And the clique is. They're people who know each other. They're people who have the same sort of background. Usually guys in their 50s or maybe a little older. The investors in the projects are from the same set, and their juniors are from the same set again. And I would say that they've deteriorated a bit.
What do you mean deteriorated?
The older and more gentlemanly ones.
Oh, you think things have got worse, not better? So the stereotype has become more acute, not less?
Well, I think some of the polish has come off. Funny enough, I said to the research lady, I was just talking this morning to my direct boss, who's a very nice man, and a public schoolboy, and an old-fashioned gentleman in his late 60s. And he was bemoaning the fact, as I do, that public schoolboys nowadays don't seem to have that classical education. They haven't got the good quality of English. I know it's not necessarily the case that a public school gives you all your O-levels at grade A. I mean, I think last time I spoke to you, we were talking about AS level statistics, and I went to a comprehensive and got a grade A. So it's not necessarily the case that every education at public school is always excellent, but the background reading, the sort of knowledge.
Yeah, that may be true, but that'll be more to do with curriculums than it will be with schools. So, if in a single word, you're talking about entitlement.
No, I'm talking about exploitation. Like we're the
but they think they're entitled. They think they're entitled to exploit you. So it is entitlement.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you that one.
It sort of is. And how do you guard against that generalisation? The fact that the ones you've encountered are a self-selecting sample, and it might well be that 90% of the people that went to the same schools that the people you're talking about went to are absolutely lovely, like me.
They might be. But I only, as you said,
say what you see. Say what you see, in the words of the great Roy Walker. Say what you see. Thank you, Steve. I'm going to stay in Chester. How weird is that? Jonathan is there. Jonathan, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. So I left state comprehensive in the Midlands 5 years ago.
Right.
And, I don't really, from my local private school, I went to comprehensive, but from my local school, private school, the kids were, the same as us, really. The difference in, they weren't really entitled. It's a bit different if you go to the Eatons and the
I think this might be part of the point that she's making, the lady from the Independent Schools Council, is that we judge these massive schools that are on the crown and apply the negative impressions we get of them to any fee-paying school in the country.
Yeah, I think the difference is the way teachers engage with you. In private schools, it seems like it's, the teachers aren't quite so... they're more easier on the kids. In a comprehensive school, I think you haven't gone to.
I used to get beaten regularly. How often did you get beaten at your comprehensive school?
Well, I was heavily scolded quite often.
Schmolded. How often were you beaten?
No, but very heavily.
How often were you beaten with a specially designed tool?
often teachers at comprehensive schools, they have a really tough job, especially nowadays. They've got all sorts.
It can be crowd control. We're getting off message. What is the public school stereotype for you? Because it doesn't sound like you subscribe to the idea that there is one, really.
When I was in first year, I was living in my flat, and one of the lads went to a really prestigious private school in London. He was a day student, not a boarder.
Right.
And, he was a lot more polished. He was a lot more polished than I was.
You mean socially comfortable?
Yeah, well...
Slick, smooth.
Yeah, he was slick, and also...
that's really interesting. I think that's probably...
He knew how to conduct himself. He was very wary of conduct. And I do think that comes from coming from a large private school in London, quite high fees. It's a bit different if you come from a smaller private school of 400 kids elsewhere in the UK.
Yes, I mean, that's why, it's a very snobbish distinction to make that most people won't even understand, thank goodness, but that's why essentially talking about public school stereotypes rather than just private school stereotypes. But there it is. The swagger is what you're talking about, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Most people would quite like to be more confident, and it's usually fake confidence anyway. It's usually learned behaviour. And that's not, I quite like Jonathan's analysis because that's not really a negative stereotype. So what is the stereotype and does it still apply? Nick's in Forest Hill. Nick, what is the stereotype?
Well, a superiority complex.
Genuine belief that you're born better.
Well, or that your opportunities have given you the platform for which you and future generations can establish that superiority.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not, a lot of public school chaps I know went as some were boarders. A lot went on bursaries and the day school trust system, but a lot went, were fee paying. And they kind of, yes.
What?
It's difficult to describe it.
Say what you see. Say what you see.
I remember trying to get a handle on how this all worked, being a state school boy.
Right.
And it's, well, how much are you earning a year? Oh, you can go there. You can afford that, surely. And of course, I found I couldn't to send my kids there. And I remember, kids, by the time these kids, children of friends reached their teens, they were changed animals. They had a kind of the swagger that your previous caller used.
Why can't you have it?
Because I have no need of it.
Oh, hang on. I thought we were talking about it as a good thing, I thought.
Well, I don't think you get it because it's not. Public schools are so well financed, so well set up in terms of facilities, such a small teacher to pupil ratio.
Some are, but generally speaking, I'm trying to work out. So the stereotype still exists as far as you're concerned, and we are talking about whether we see it as a positive or a negative. Because if you call it swagger, it sounds a bit negative. You call it confidence, it sounds like a positive. And entitlement. People who believe that they have every right, every imaginable right to the most glittering prizes.
Yes, but they come away from this, and I've had conversations with about 3 of my friends from public school that they have a right to be the ruling class because of they think,
and that's still in place, is it? You think because you're my age, aren't you? You're not sort of
slightly older, but
older.
I can remember. When Rishi Sunak came into power and all that, I was recalling friends from Winchester who tried to describe Winchester as a kind of left-leaning boarding school, but hardly. I'm thinking nonsense, and they both had a kind of a crisis of public school confidence at one point, and they went into the public sector and became teachers. And that sort of morality blip lasted about 2 years, and then they both went into the.
You want to get back to the glittering prize? I think Rees Mogg made a joke that referenced a school that Rishi Sunak went to. Really, if you were a foreigner watching that, you'd just wonder where the hell you'd ended up. Someone standing up in the state legislature or the House of Commons and making a joke about another politician. Was it about Rishi Sunak? Was it about someone else? And he said, well, you're a Wickhamist, so of course something. That's when my heart sinks. That's when I think this country is sort of hidebound almost and hostage to these centuries-old or certainly decades-old ludicrous prejudices. It's coming up to 12:30. Amelia Cox has your headlines. It is 12:33 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Yeah, it's true that I just checked. You can get How to Be Right, my first book, for free for 30 days at Audible. I've tweeted it. You can click on the link at Mr. James OB. It's good. It's a good deal, that. Also, it means I can take a bit of time off from plugging my new book, How They Broke Britain, which I will return to doing tomorrow. I'll take the rest of the day off. But there it is. Listen for free for 30 days. Audible's really good, actually. I like it a lot. Public school stereotypes. It is an interesting conversation. It's a peculiarly British, not English. It's a peculiarly British conversation. Edinburgh is a city. I wonder where there are the most public schools per square mile. Probably Edinburgh. We may return to that. But Natasha Clark, LBC's political editor, is here with a box fresh oven ready scoop.
Oven ready deal, James. The government have just signed a deal to end the strikes with NHS consultants, which is good news for everybody that's hoping to get an NHS operation anytime soon. The government says they've put forward an offer that will modernise the consultants' contract and reform their pay structure. The unions, the BMA, have agreed to this. It sounds like they're going to then put it to their members, 55,000 of them. So hopefully that will see an end to some of those crippling strikes that we've seen recently. And obviously the junior doctors still on strike, so we still don't have a deal with them. But the government feeling quite hopeful today that this could pave the way to a deal with them too.
Okay, so I suppose from the BMA's point of view, the industrial action has worked. I thought the government weren't going to come to the table. That was exactly the last I heard.
Yeah, exactly.
Is this a sign of the new health secretary in place?
Definitely.
Okay.
Speaking to people behind the scenes, they seem to be quite confident that she has been quite helpful, Victoria Atkins, in pushing through this new deal. Obviously, talks have been going on for much longer than the 2 weeks that she's been in post, but they're quite happy that she's been a bit of a more constructive and a little bit more amenable to some of their demands. So
it's a funny period, isn't it, for you as a political editor? Because Cleverly seems to be departing fairly violently from his predecessor in the Foreign Office, and now we have evidence of a health secretary who's prepared to talk to the health service, and as a consequence of that has perhaps removed one of the obstacles to a full return to work.
Yeah, definitely. The two very different approaches from Steve Barclay, I think, was seen as a little bit prickly. The unions did not really like the way that he was approaching this. I think what we are waiting to see is really whether people buy this deal, because it's not going to give them a pay rise in essence like the pay rise that was struck in some of the other deals. Essentially, it means that they will have reform of some of their pay bands. So essentially, they will reduce the number of pay bands there will be, I think, from 19 down to 14. So it will be easier to go up a pay band. You'll be able to go to your manager and say, look, I want to go up a pay band, rather than waiting for the yearly looking at your pay structure that is so rigid within the health service at the moment. But whether the consultants accept it or not, obviously a deal being struck is only the first step. They will have to vote on it, and only when they vote on it and whether to vote to accept it will we know whether these strikes will come to an end.
Many thanks indeed, Natasha Clark. I didn't really understand what the strike was about in the first place, but it's a very good job.
It's always about pay, mate.
So I know it's about pay, but about different grades and not getting ahead. But I'm very glad that it's over. I think we can all breathe a sigh of relief. 12:37 is the time. Back to this notion of public school stereotypes, a complaint from the head of the Independent Schools Council that the depiction of them on the Netflix series is affecting the public perception. I suppose we can add that to the mix. I don't know that anybody's perception of public schools is informed by watching The Crown on the telly. It's informed by having to work with someone who wears bright red trousers and honks instead of talking normally. And that's me indulging in stereotypes. So what is the 2023 stereotype, and is it fair? Toby is in Clapham, which I think you have to be a public school boy to live in Clapham, don't you?
Hi, James. Good afternoon. Hello. Yeah, no, I was fortunate enough to go to a public school a few years ago. I left in 2019, but I'm not helping the stereotype here, am I, by sort of living in Clapham and living in London. But no, I popped in a few weeks back to my old public school, and I popped into the boarding house. So that's where we as students would sort of stay during the term time, for those who don't know. I popped in to see my matron and sort of the cleaning team there. I had quite a good relationship with them when I was at school. But when I popped in, I asked to catch up how things were going. Yeah. They just were aghast at how things had changed over the past
just in 4
years. 5 years. Yeah. I mean, we had a great relationship, and if one of my friends had left clothes on the floor, the housemaster, the matron, they'd be all be up in arms, and we'd be slightly sad and feel quite guilty for sort of putting this on the cleaning team. But when I went back and asked, they were like, the children who are here now are even more entitled. They just demand and they just leave everything and they expect it all to be done for them.
What do you think has happened? I mean, because some of these kids would have been there when you were there, though. So I struggle, but I suppose change is both incremental and then not, isn't it? So when you were in the sixth form, the people who are in the sixth form now would have been in the fifth form. So what do you think has happened? It's become more exclusive because I'm much older than you, and looking at the sums of money needed to pay fees and looking at wages and average wages, or the wages that someone like my father would earn on the Daily Telegraph. There's no earthly way he could afford now on what a Daily Telegraph journalist earns to send me to the school that he sent me to. So some of it is going to be entitlement born of wealth rather than the schooling, isn't it? It's hard to separate the two.
Yeah, well, there are two reasons for it. When I first went to public school, there was an immense pressure from the upper years to sort of fall in line, and we were with a whole year were sort of scared of even sort of we'd let them in front in the lunch queue to sort of come in front of us because they were so much older, so much bigger, so much scarier.
Yes.
And when we left, when I was in sort of upper sixth, and there was we weren't allowed to do that anymore.
This is great. So this is in 2019. You're sounding like even before. So the youth of today have got no respect, is what you're telling me, Toby. Really?
Yeah, I am. And the second point there.
Those are these kids these days. Kids these days. Honestly, they don't know they're born. They should know. But so you're getting a different message by attending one of these schools. I hadn't thought of it that way around.
And the second reason, like you say, is that some of these schools, the fees for a year are upwards of £40,000, and if you think about that, that's 70, 80 pre-tax thousand
you've got spare
more you need, and
brothers
that's
and
a crazy figure.
Yeah, I think it's probably understood. I meant to say 2 unders then, not 4. And in fact plays into the Labour Party policies a bit on this with the VAT as well. 57% of adults support Labour's plans to charge VAT on school fees, which is surprisingly low when you think that it's under 10% of the population that actually attends these schools. But these sums of money, 50 grand a year at Eton, according to the Daily Mail today. So that means you've got to be, as Toby demonstrating his quality mathematical education, as Toby points out, that that's in the 40% bracket at least, isn't it? So in order to earn 50 grand, to have 50 grand spare to spend school fees, presuming that you pay your income tax according to the expectations and rules, and you've got to be earning north of 80. Before you've even done anything. It's an astonishing sum of money. How can you raise a child with that level of wealth without that child thinking that they've, scored a hat-trick, even though they were born 3-0 up? You can do it. I've got friends whose parents have succeeded in doing that, and I've got friends who I hope are succeeding in doing it themselves, but it's a lot harder than it used to be. Malcolm's in Older in Germany. Malcolm, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Keep up the good work, mate.
I'll do my best. What a lovely thing to say. Thank you.
I'd like to take you back to when I was in the army.
Go on.
They go through public school, then they go to Sandhurst after, and then they come to join the regiment later on.
That's correct.
When we would go on to exercise, some of them couldn't even dress themselves properly.
But Sandhurst, do you mean like ceremonial dress, or do you mean lace their own boots?
Combat dress.
Combat dress, okay.
Yeah, they go on exercise, they wear their berry like Benny Hillwood, and they put the gaiters on upside down. And then one day I was the commanding officer's signaller, and he said, "Oh, man, they always have this. Oh gosh, okay, right here." And he said to me, "Holmes, what are we having for lunch today?"
Yes.
I said, "I'll make you 2 egg banjos, sir." An egg banjo is a military term for piece of bread, fried egg, piece of bread.
Delicious.
And that twice. And
where's this going?
This is it, when I was in the army. Their entitlement, how they lost all sorts of...
That must be the weirdest thing then, because you are obliged to follow their orders, and yet you are pretty clear-eyed about the fact that they are not really qualified in any other meaningful way to lead you.
No, not one bit. He took all 4 slices of bread and went, "Oh, good grief." And he tried to eat it all at the same time.
All in one go?
Yeah, instead of
That's
taking
quite
two
funny.
individual sandwiches.
No, I know how sandwiches work. The point you're making is that he didn't.
He didn't.
But you'd have to follow him over the top back in the day.
Yeah,
He sounds like
yeah.
Percy out of Blackadder,
And then
doesn't he?
if I was sitting in the back of the Land Rover, commanding officer, he had a little hole in the back of behind his seat,
Yes.
and he would shout out to me, "Kit Kat coming through,
That's
chocolate
nice.
bar coming through."
But that's nice. So there's not a stereotype here, really, unless you're saying they were all a bit thick.
Not thick, obviously not.
The bloke couldn't eat a sandwich, Malcolm. I thought.
I know. And well, common sense is
All right, lacking that.
a bit more.
Lacking. I've always found. I mean, Sandhurst has changed a lot since then. It's a lot more inclusive now. But I always found that when I left school, my friends that wanted to join the army went straight to. You would, by dint of going to a school like mine, it was half the battle for getting into Sandhurst. And I always found that very odd. I didn't really understand, because I wasn't raised that way. And the idea that you, by dint of your background or your class, you're a better leader of men than you would be if you'd come up via a different route was a very odd way of looking at the world.
An old mate of mine, he reached the rank of major.
Yes.
And he went through the ranks, and I said, well, how do you enjoy communicating with the officers in the officers' mess and things like this? And they said to him, he said, they don't understand me. These upper class people like to push you down a bit, sort of.
Well, then you enforce their own position, don't they, by reminding you of yours, I think.
Yeah, want to remind you from where you come from. And another thing, I believe that the English language is the only language, probably in the world, I don't know, who has this upper class sort of way of talking, and to the normal average guy on the street.
Well, again, it's code. I think it's designed to kind of distinguish your difference, and it works in different ways as well, not just at universities. No Hostages has sent me this from a Sutton Trust report in 2022, first-hand testimony. I was mostly ostracised by my university classmates. The overwhelming majority of students came from private and public schools. I was one of very few state school students. Most students would excuse themselves immediately after hearing my accent to find friends elsewhere. The few friends I had during undergrad were from working class backgrounds whom I met in my accommodation by chance. I did not join any societies at university due to my insecurity about my accent. I felt that I didn't belong, and that comes from within and without. I don't know how you address the coming from within, but the deliberate ostracisation. Is it ostracisation or ostracism? Ostracism. They're not bad people. They don't even know that they're doing it. They're just being like magnets, being drawn to similar. It is 12:46. It is 12:49, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Pete puts it well from Manchester. Not a better leader of men, James, just less likely to die in battle by virtue of your rank. Is that true? I don't know enough, actually, but I have to say a couple of people had very different experiences from Malcolm. I have to say, he says, I had the exact opposite experience of public school boys as officers. They were all superb. And Michael in Kilburn says, have you seen Sunak try to use a hammer? That was a foul slur, Michael. I did see that little clip that went viral. In fact, I shared it saying, this can't be right. I just thought it was, even the bloke who pretended to borrow a car so he could pretend to use a petrol pump and didn't appear to know how to use a contactless debit card. I don't know if you saw it. He was at some jewellery workshop and he was using the middle bit of the hammer, and everyone was going, oh my God, he doesn't even know how to use a hammer. But I didn't. I thought there must be more to that than meets the eye, because it's such everybody. You don't have to be a horny-handed son of the soil to be familiar with how hammers work. You just have to have watched cartoons as a kid. So I tweeted it quite mischievously, because I wanted people to find it funny, because it is funny. But I did say in my original tweet, this can't be. There must be more to this than meets the eye. And then lo and behold, someone sent out the longer footage where the jewellery creator, the jewellery producer, told him to use the middle bit of the hammer. You're probably thinking, what's the middle bit of the hammer? But turn it flat. Right, so you got your hammer held normally. Now turn it 90 degrees. And and he was using that bit to hammer it with, but he was supposed to. But it was, halfway around the world, wasn't it? By the time the truth had got its trousers on. And yes, I know when I said they're like magnets, they're attracted to each other. I know when I said it, I thought, oh, hang on a minute, opposites attract, as the great Paula Abdul taught us. But the point stands. They're like iron filings. I thought that was true. Stephen Colchester says junior officers he thinks they have a higher death rate by proportion. You thought you'd be leading from the front, but we don't really fight wars like that. And I always find public school boys sanctimonious. That's not true. I'm quite sanctimonious. I went to public school, but I don't think that's a typical trait of the cohort. 12:52 is the time. Chris is in Twickenham. What is the stereotype, Chris, and is it getting better or worse?
Well, I think the stereotype probably is confidence or swagger, as it's been referred to on previous callers. And I think obviously the swagger thing is not quite as positive as a confidence thing.
No.
But the thing that worries me more really is the effect that the whole system has on the state education.
The people who didn't go there. Yes. I think you're absolutely right.
And that's the thing that worries me. I think it's the thing that perhaps we should concentrate more on. I mean, the moron.
No, you're a moron. How dare you ring me on my own show and call me a moron? It's outrageous.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it was probably the Johnson government that whacked on about levelling up. But I think as long as there's no chance really for our society to level up while we've got this crazy system, it's not crazy, but it's just very divisive. And it splits us down the middle, or perhaps not quite the middle, but you know what I mean.
Well, it's nowhere near the middle, but it does. It creates a sort of ceiling, doesn't it?
It does, and I think it probably demoralises a lot of kids who just think that they're already having a hard time, and then when you realise
what's the point?
Inequality of it all, you just you give up, and that's sad, because I think the thing that the state system still offers, or at least kids in the state system, are often generally just as adequate as the kids that are in the.
Of course they are.
That's
system. Biology, isn't it? They're going to be born with just as.
But I think they then start to think that perhaps isn't the case, and therefore they don't get the confidence that kids get in the private system. So I mean, there you are.
Well, hang on. How much of this are you drawing on experience, and how much are you theorising? Nothing wrong with theorising.
No, I have it. I mean, I'm a working class guy that's kind of made good, not particularly, but I've had a sort of professional life as an architect, and I've met a lot of people that have come from the private school education system, and there is this. What did you say earlier about the sort of the need to there's almost the rite of passage that I'm in this position. You're even as an architect, because they knew I wasn't from that system. It's sort of you're seen in a slightly different light, that's always kind of not hugely niggled me, but occasionally it's sort of
it is, isn't it? Because you can say it's all meaningless, but if everybody who benefited from that sort of education is upholding the idea that it's meaningful, then it becomes meaningful, even though it isn't and shouldn't be. It creates a sort of a velvet curtain, doesn't it? It creates a velvet rope, which you might be able to clamber over, but that doesn't negate the existence of the rope.
Sure, yeah.
It's a funny one. Thank you, mate. I like that. But next time, don't call me a moron, eh? You know, try to keep it friendly.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. I can live with it. I've been called worse in my own inbox. Sean's in Nottingham. Sean, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James.
Hello,
and thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
And thanks for keeping us safe these last few years.
Oh, lovely thing to say. Thank you.
No, I mean it.
Well, you have to prove you're sane, Sean. It's not for you to say, is it? I'd have to take testimony from your nearest and dearest.
They might have a different opinion. Right.
Where are we?
Well, what I wanted to say was my eldest boy is Professor of International Relations at Nottingham University. Now, he went to a state comprehensive, and I remember a conversation I had with him when he first started lecturing at Nottingham, and I said, how are you getting on, boy?
Yeah.
He said, Dad, I set an essay, and he could be talking about 50 students.
Yeah.
I'll set an essay to students, and the very next day, private school educated students would knock on his door and say, Dr. Cormack, could we discuss this essay? I've got a few points I'd like to run past you.
Yeah.
And treating my son as if he's a complete equal. There's no sort of deference or diffidence. Whereas the kids from the undergraduates from the state comprehensive schools, they'd meekly knock on his door and say, Dr. Cormack, is there any chance we could meet next week and you could perhaps give us a few ideas about... And I used to find it quite interesting, in a way sad, that there was this difference between
that's really
private school students,
because what you want is the state school students to be more like the private school students rather than the private school students to be more like the state school students, or not?
No, totally, James. I agree with you. I was in education for 40 years and in state schools, and one of the things I always wanted to instill in my students, it's pretty hard, is this idea of confidence and that you can do things.
Yeah.
Because we've got 93% of our kids go to state schools, and there's some brilliant kids.
Of course
creative, scientific.
No, it's a national tragedy. It's a national disaster. It's like hobbling ourselves as a country by giving kids at 18 a sense that they've already missed out on something by not having been to a school like that, not having been to a school like this, or that other doors, other avenues will be closed to them or much harder to navigate. It's crazy, isn't it? Rather than doing the opposite and trying to teach children that the sky's the limit.
No, I couldn't agree more. And if this country is ever going to get back on its feet, we need to tap into the brilliance of these state school kids. And instead of them going off out into the big wide world, diffident and afraid and unsure, if only we could make them feel, I am good and I can do it. Anyway, that was my observation from my son.
It's a very powerful.
I thought I'd throw it in.
No, and I'm grateful to you, Sean, and grateful to him as well, because he'll no doubt be contributing to the process that you described from the position that he holds, from the professorship, and I bet you're very proud. You should be. That's it.
Thank you.
Take care. That's it from me for another day. We are going to do it all again tomorrow morning from 10. If you miss. And listen back to the whole show podcast on Global Player, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. You'll also find all of LBC's shows to catch up on, as well as all of Global's live radio stations. You can pause, rewind live radio on Global Player, and you are always in control. Download it for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 o'clock on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now...
That was me sniffing.
Was it you
I know that's me hitting the microphone.
Hit the microphone. You'll get the hang of this. Have you done this before?
No, I'm new.
Okay, and here is my latest colleague, Sheila Fogarty.
I'm very new. I've never done it before. That was the last one I did deliberately, everybody. 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 I did deliberately, everybody.